Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show. Another exciting show and definitely another exciting guest. So let me tell you what we're about to do today. We're about to understand these words. I'm going to use these words. Authenticity, if I said that right, forgiveness, hope, and more importantly, understanding the joy and freedom. And I know what you're saying. What does all that have to do with today's show? We're going to let one woman tell you how all of those words shaped her to the person that she is, growing up in dysfunctional situations in the household, genetic curse is what I call it, and how she's taken all of these three words and basically is now resonating joy and more importantly freedom. And she's going to tell you how all that came to be. Let's welcome all the way from Colorado, Miss Meg Hall. How you doing, Meg?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
I see you just smiling like crazy right now. I must have said something good to you.
You brought up those great words.
So before we get started, you're in Colorado. Tell the viewers a little bit about who you are before we dive deep into those three words and how you use those words to put yourself in the position that you're in right now.
Yeah, so I'm originally a farm girl, grew up on a farm in Minnesota, and then went to college, became a nurse, and got a degree in nursing and psychology, and then went to work as a nurse and started off right in psychiatry, which fits with growing up with two mentally ill family members, my grandma and my father, who lived with us. And I loved nursing. I loved psych nursing. I loved understanding what people were thinking and doing. And then it just kind of automatically I got into leadership. And for me, that was about providing the best possible quality care for patients at an affordable rate and truly connecting with those patients. So years later, when I took a break from leadership, I went into hospice nursing. And that was actually the point where my life turned, based on, some experiences with patients who were dying. And I then started the journey to find my authentic self in my 40s. And my life has just continued to get better since that time. And now I retired last year out of healthcare administration and nursing. And I'm just out here to help other people not live in that victim stance that I was living in for many years, find their joy, forgive those who, have done incredible things to them, terrible things to them, and then really figure out who they are. I had no idea who I was. So I love the journey that I took to figure that out and then live in alignment with those values.
Let's talk about two words that you mentioned earlier when we talked: expectation and victim. Clarify that a little bit to the viewers, because a lot of people find themselves being a victim, and a lot of people find themselves not taking accountability. I believe just because you got put in a victim situation doesn't mean that you have to sometimes find the accountability within yourself to say, how can I change that particular word? But let's go back to those two words. Explain those two words and how you pivot with those.
Yeah, so growing up, I was abused on a regular basis, physically, emotionally, spiritually even. And so when I graduated high school and went to college, I saw myself as lazy, fat, ugly, stupid, all the words I'd been told all of my life. And I started creating a life that matched those words. And so I was truly what I call now living in my victimhood. I was angry. I was acting out. I was getting into very unhealthy relationships, using drugs and alcohol. Just had a really tough few years, ended up being raped. And that was kind of the first call to me, was not that it was my fault that I got raped. Absolutely not. But it was kind of an opportunity to me to step back and just kind of review what I'm doing. And is this the life? Is this how I want to be identified? Is this angry, acting out young woman? And I didn't. And so that was the first step in my journey towards not living the expectations that I had been given as a child and as a young person, a young teenager. I didn't want to continue to live according to those expectations.
What was it like in your household? You mentioned, if I heard you correctly, you had your mom and your dad both lived in the house, and then you brought in your grandparents. Did I get that right?
So before my mom and dad got married, my grandfather and grandmother and father owned the farm, and then my grandfather passed away. So it was actually my grandma and my dad's house, and my mother and I were simply allowed to exist.
What do you mean when you say simply allowed to exist? Which means they put a roof over your head and gave you food and say, shut the hell up?
Pretty much, yeah. And do the work. Make sure you do all the work. My mom worked full-time during the day and then full-time in the evening. I got home, actually, as a 3 or 4 year old, I started doing chores. I remember my grandma we had to take the milking machines down the basement to scrub them once a week. And I would bring them up to the top step and they would be inspected. And if they weren't perfectly clean, then I would be pushed back down the stairs with the milking machine.
Old, 3 and 4 doing this?
About 4.
Get out of here.
Yep.
That's almost unheard of.
Yeah.
You mentioned, so let me go back.
My keep.
Yeah, let me go back a little bit so people can kind of understand this journey that you had, because these are behaviors that if you don't recognize the behaviors, and at 4 years old, you're not recognizing nothing. This becomes part of the norm. But as you got older, how was your mother being treated by your grandparents? Because you're still little, so their behavior hasn't changed, but it is now a reflection onto, I take it, to your mom now. So how was she being treated that you remember?
So she was always treated as, my grandma called her the sinner woman. So she would have to sit in the back seat when we would go somewhere. She wasn't allowed to sit up front with my father. My grandmother would do some laundry, but she wouldn't do her laundry. My grandmother would sit at the base of the upstairs stairs and watch, and my mother and father had to sleep separately. So she would sit there guard to make sure that they didn't cross into each other's rooms. So she was truly a less citizen. She was just there to work, do what she was told, and bring in money.
Okay, but you already conceived. So I'm trying to understand, why was they separated? Why was it so adamant to keep them separated when they already had you?
Because my grandmother didn't want me to happen, but I happened. And so she wanted to make sure there was no other children to take away attention from her. She was bipolar with psychosis. So some of what she did.
Bipolar.
Yes.
Wow.
And so a lot of what she did didn't make logical sense, but it was her way of thinking.
Wow. What about your dad?
My dad was later diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder, and my grandmother actually would get help. She would go to the state hospital every few months. Back then, they didn't have the right treatments, but they did what they could. My father never acknowledged that he had a problem, that he had behavioral issues, that he had an anger issue. So he just continued on his merry way, leaving a path of destruction in front of him.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but what was that again your father was diagnosed with? That
intermittent explosive disorder. So he had just a very poor controlled temper. Anything would just set him off like that into a rage.
How did he stay out of trouble?
Later in his life, he didn't. He ended up with a lot of restraining orders on him and fired from jobs. And but early on in life, he was a farmer, so he didn't have a whole lot of association with a lot of other people. And when he was in public, he presented as this very Christian, well-behaved, jovial, fun man.
You mentioned that they handicapped you in so many areas, and one in particular was your spiritual side. When did all of this start to really have a profound effect on you, that it started to really handicap your own personal journey?
So I think the spiritual part, my grandmother, every time we had a thunderstorm, we had to come and confess, my mother and I, of our sins. And then we would get what she perceived as appropriate punishment. And then we would go to church and be this perfect family. So for me, that planted a seed of, what is this faith? What is this Christianity? It's torture at home, and then it talks of love and grace and forgiveness at church. Mm-hmm. So by the time I left home, I was so confused as far as, is there a God? Yeah. And if so, why does he, promote all of this happening? So it took me a long time to work through my spiritual journey.
Give the viewer as an example, because you're not Catholic. So two-part question. How did they come up with this ideology of making you confess? So they had to have some experience to some degree with, the Catholic religion. Then second of all, what's some examples that they had with punishment on top of that? If that makes any sense. I'm totally baffled.
So all this started with, my grandmother and her delusions that anytime thunder and lightning happened, that means someone in her family circle had sinned. And because my mother and I were the targets, it was automatically us. And at first I was being honest with what I thought I had sinned about, and found out that led to beatings and whippings and Bible readings and all that. So, I was actually talking to my writing coach, and I said we had to develop safe sins. So sins that would only get us Bible readings and book reports and things like that, instead of beatings.
Which one would, which sins would cause the beating? Which sins would cause the beating for your mom? From your mom?
Lying. For my mom?
Yeah.
She was always accused of lying. And so she would, at first she would, no, I didn't tell you that I stopped here on my way home from work. And so therefore she didn't get a beating. She usually just got other types of punishment.
So you had to
I was the one who got the beatings.
You had to learn how to practice deception under spirituality.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes.
I
know.
I tell people everybody has a story, and some stories just really sound unbelievable. Yeah. So now you're practicing how to deceive under a religious flag in the household. Who was there to protect you? Because this sounds total dysfunction all the way around. Like, was there a safe zone for you?
Yeah, there was really no one. My mother was always threatened that she would be killed if she did anything to interfere with my raising. So there was really no one to protect me. But she would do what she could, which we processed this many years later. But so she would bring me in, and this led to another life habit. She would bring me cookies or ice cream or a piece of cake or something after a beating in my room. She'd sneak in and grab it and bring it to me, and just tell me she loved me and she was sorry. And so the little corner in my room was kind of the safe place that I had, where I associated comfort with food.
How old was your mom when she had you, when she conceived you?
She was 20 when she got married. She was 21 when she had me.
So really, your mom lived just as much as a fear factor, just like you did. So she knew
yes,
that you was going to get the same punishments that she got growing up. So the same things that you were being exposed to, your mom had already been exposed to it. I take it. I don't know. What do you?
No, my father. So what happened from what I understand in history, what I've been explained is my grandmother didn't become bipolar until she was in her late 40s, early 50s. Mm-hmm. So my father had a very good childhood, generally good childhood. My mother was raised by my other grandparents. So no, my father didn't grow up in this environment, and neither did my mother.
Wow. When your mother came to you in these safe zones, when did your mom realize something has to be done? I mean, you're 20 years old. You see there's dysfunction. And let me clear something too, because a lot of viewers may not understand this. A lot of people didn't know what bipolar was at that particular time. Am I correct? So this just seems to be an unusual pattern that's going on, because it wasn't until recently that particular word started to surface and more research has gone into this. But let's go back to this particular question. When did your mom say, I got to get you out of this? I couldn't stand to see my child.
I was probably 2 or 3 when the beating started. And so she immediately thought, I got to get out of here. So she told my dad that she was leaving and taking me with. And he said, that's fine. You'll be dead in a day. And he said, then grandmother and I will raise our daughter. So that's up to you. If you want to die and leave her totally to our control, you can do that.
What she chose not to, obviously. Die? I mean, did you guys live in a bad neighborhood? I mean, what was their definition of die? I mean, that you're not going to be able to function in society? Is that was their definition of dying? Or that?
No, he was going to shoot her. He was going to shoot her.
He was going to shoot her?
He was going to shoot her. Yep, and bury her out in the woods.
No way.
Yeah. That was his plan if she tried to take me.
And probably because y'all lived on a farm, nobody would even question where she is.
Nope. The only issue would have been her work, why she didn't show up. And he would have just said, oh, she's decided to quit and be on the farm full time. So he had it all figured out.
That sounds almost diabolical, narcissistic, but I'm not a doctor. That's crazy.
I know.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as I talk about this, it's like this was my normal life. So to me, it doesn't seem as crazy as it does to other people because this was just my life.
How was you able to finish school, go to college, and be... Well, you can't be normal because that's not normal as we consider normal. So I would take it you still brought those functions into your everyday life. But this is okay. Just to say, for instance, you had to do that. This is the norm to you. And now you go to high school and college. The more you elevate in your age, the more you start seeing things that don't really line up to what's going on in your household. Mm-hmm. So the question here is, when you got to college and stuff, how did you manage to say, this just ain't right? I need to figure out something here.
So I knew it when I got to college, I knew it wasn't right. I had a roommate that I shared some of my experiences with, and she was just shocked. I'm like, why are you shocked? This is what growing up is like. So I learned that no, this isn't what growing up is like for most people.
Right.
And then I just got angry. So my college years, yes, I went to classes. My parents cut me off financially because I wouldn't follow their rules. So I worked full time as well. And I just took this stand of, I'm going to prove I can do these things in spite of everything. Mm-hmm. And so it was a challenging 4 or 5 years. It really was. And I think I took a psychology course actually where we did like role play group therapy.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a whole lot of boundaries at that point. And so I was asked to question something about childhood, and it just came all flowing out. And
Wow.
everyone in the class was just speechless. And my professor caught me afterwards and said, I'm sending you to counseling. He said, you need help.
That's probably the best thing he could have done for you at that time.
Exactly. Exactly, it was.
Wow. First of all, let me say thank you so much for coming on the show and being so open with this story. A lot of people will definitely find that hard to believe, but in today's society, you'd be surprised what people deal with every day and they think is the norm.
Yeah.
And then something they like you said, they get put in a situation and they begin to look at their life and go, wow, my life wasn't like this. It was filled with this, that, and the other. So let's move forward a little bit. So you finished school. What was the relationship like with your family once you decided to pivot and recognize this isn't normal? Like, how did the relationship continue with your family members? Did you disassociate yourself with them? Because it's like this. You can't bring back your newfound religion, which means your newfound education, to an environment where that was unspeakable. But they're still your family. Mm-hmm. So how do you bridge the gap that they don't take away your newfound identity because they're still living in that particular identity and you're still trying to recognize that they're still your family? How did you do that?
So initially, like in college, just very superficial communications with them. I would go home for holidays and usually that was at my other grandparents. And, it was just very superficial. I would just give them lip service and they'd say, oh, you're not doing this. Or you're not doing that. Nope, I'm not doing that. I'm just going to be a nurse. That's all I'm doing, and so it was, again, the deception, but at the next level, and just kept my boundaries of, I'm not going to let you in emotionally at all because I'm trying to rebuild and recover.
What was the relationship like with your mom? Because your mom, your grandparents is a different story because that's been so deeply rooted in them. And if you probably wasn't familiar with their parents and their legacy, it's hard to really understand just how deep that particular side went. Mm-hmm. But your mom is a lot different. What was that relationship like with your mom? And more importantly, why was your mom and stuff still there with your grandparents? Why didn't she just, because you left and went off. I mean, but why keep going back to that toxic environment?
Yeah, so first question is, I was very distant with my mom as well, because as things started coming out, going to counseling and stuff, I was just really angry that she didn't protect me. Mm-hmm. And that I was left to my own devices basically to survive that. She, by the time, kind of like me, we had, and I say, the self-esteem of a gnat. I mean, we just didn't think we were worth anything. And so she had been so thoroughly programmed by that time that she felt she could never survive on her own. My dad still had the threat over her of killing her. And so she felt she wasn't worth anything. So why not just stay where she was?
You just brought up something. And we talked about this when we first started the show. Victim and accountability and the skill rates to master all this. I get it. You still upset at your mom because your mom and your dad are supposed to be the protector, but let's get real for a minute. And I know you're mature now. You probably said the same thing I'm about ready to say. You probably came to that realization that your mom, those were the mechanisms that she knew to survive anyway. She couldn't pass on any survival traits to you, but what she was able to do, which is that same corner you hid in, was probably the same damn corner that she hid in. But the only difference was somebody wasn't bringing her cookies and ice cream.
Right. Exactly.
Wow.
And, many years later, once I had worked through a lot of this and I had, taken accountability for what behaviors I took on because of this and really worked through them and became a much healthier person, her and I were able to have those conversations, and that's where the forgiveness comes in. I was able to forgive her.
And once you gotten mature and older and stuff, how difficult was it for you to sit there and listen to the things that she went through? Was that almost like reliving your own life through your mom's
It
words?
was to me it was incredibly sad, and really frustrating, but it also was validating because all my childhood I couldn't understand why she didn't help me, why she didn't rescue me, why she didn't take me, why she didn't do more. And so when we were finally able to sit down and really process this, then I was relieved to understand there was a reason there. It wasn't that she just didn't like me or didn't love me. There was a reason why she didn't do more to protect me.
Were there ever any moments of, and I hate to ask this, but a lot of times when things get that deep and we find that there's almost what appears to be no light at the end of the tunnel, we start thinking about just why am I here?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I did a lame attempt at suicide when I was about 13. Just took a bunch of my grandma's pills for her mental illness, and went to bed and hoped in the morning I wouldn't wake up. But unfortunately,
Wow.
Unfortunately, at the time, I felt I woke up. So then I realized I was stuck in this until I graduated.
You wind up changing and getting more involved in the different aspects of the medical field. One in particular, the hospice. What was that like going from just basic nursing care and dealing with patients? Now you're dealing with people that are on the brink of crossing over to a whole different life. What was that like for you, knowing what you had already went through for so many years as a child and pre-adulthood, pre-teenhood, dealing with patients now? This is a whole different ball game of bigger responsibilities, both emotionally, mentally, and let's call it what it is, spiritually. What was that like for you, and how did you navigate it? More importantly, what did you bring with all that you went through? What did you bring to that particular arena of hospice care?
So I think, this was a good 25 years after I had left home, gone to college, all that. I'd been in psych nursing and leadership for a long time and then needed a break from the politics of leadership. And so for me, it was like I wanted to get back to caring for patients. And what is more sacred than caring for someone as they're facing their end of their life? So I had deep empathy. I've always been a very empathetic person. I had worked through the majority of my spiritual questions, but actually hospice even gave me more opportunity to do that. I came in like my personality was, I was here to save the day, and so I had a few of my hospice patients put me in my place of saying, this is not your death, this is mine. And I'm not taking those pain meds because I want to do this or I want to do that.
Right.
And so that first 6 months was a real big learning curve for me of this wasn't about me at all. This was totally about them, and all I could do was offer them all the tools and the options that we had to help them work through whatever they needed to work through and be comfortable to the level they wanted to be comfortable for the rest of their lives and find joy.
When we talk about hospice care, there's so many people that you've cared for over the last couple of years. Can you remember one that, because your story and theirs resonated, and it still does to this day, that it still touches you?
Oh yeah, I could talk for hours on this, but there was two people in particular. One was the first one that was trying to finish a book, and I was trying to push her to be comfortable. And so she's the one who really set me straight about, you're here to serve me and to make my death the way I want it, not, here to serve you. The other one was a medical director that I had worked with. I was in a leadership position and he was the medical director. I absolutely adored him as a person. And he actually asked for me to be his hospice nurse. And we'd been working together for a couple months. And I came in one day and he looked at me and he said, and this is one thing about people who are dying, they're the most honest people you'll ever meet because they have nothing to lose. They're just saying it as it is.
Mm.
And so I came in to care for him one day and go through his meds and all that. And he looked at me and he said, "You need to do something different."
Wow.
I said, "What, are you telling me I'm not a good hospice nurse?" And he said, "No. When I first met you, you had a light in your eyes. You were bubbly. You were full of energy." He said, "You're still a fabulous nurse. You're caring, you're compassionate, but the light is gone in your eyes." And
Wow.
he said, "I don't know what's broken, but you got to fix it." And I've obviously never forgotten that.
What did you do? Because evidently you took what he said to the heart. So what action, what did you put behind the action?
So over the next year, I started to take action to leave my toxic marriage, and get out of that situation, who had, again, brought my self-esteem down to nothing. It was, you pick people sometimes like your father or your mother. Mm-hmm. I had done pretty much that. And so I started a plan to, make sure I had something financially, was going to build a house on my family farm. Also my son and I would have a place to live. My daughter was in college. And so I just started the plan to escape. And within a year, I had escaped. And there was this newfound freedom that was just amazing. Unfortunately, he had passed, so we didn't get to see the light come back in my eye. But
you mentioned that people on their deathbed are so authentic; they hold nothing back. Mm-hmm. So this is a question, because you dealt with psych. Why do you think people want to wear the mask so long and not just be authentic? Is it because they may have more trauma that they have not dealt with, because they may be afraid that their life isn't as normalized as society thinks it should be? There may be a whole lot of things, but you've been in this field. What do you think the difference is between the person that's in the hospice, say, and individuals that are not, but they're in an emotional, chaotic situation, pandemonium, the whole 9 yards? What's your take on that?
So there's a couple things there. One, my sense is until we heal ourselves and realize who we are and all we have to offer, we tend to just follow the cues and the requests and all of those things until we do, to just be whatever others want us to be. Because we don't believe in ourselves, we haven't healed ourselves, we don't even know for sure who we really are and what our values are and what's important to us, because we just get in this cycle of being who others want us to be. And, you see that. I always joke that my picker was broke when it come to picking men. And there's so many women and men out there that I see pick the same kind of people over and over. And I really feel they have never figured out their own worth. They don't love themselves, and they don't even know who they are deep down. And I think we're afraid that we're not good enough, so we don't want to see who we really are. Mm-hmm. We're afraid that some of those things, maybe if we were told negative messages, are really true. Mm-hmm. And we're afraid to find out that they're really true. Versus if we really do the work, we find out that isn't true. We have so much potential and so much to offer. So I think it's mostly fear and uncertainty that keeps us from really becoming our authentic selves and even taking that first step in that journey.
Before we wrap up, I'm gonna ask this question. I just got to ask it because it's resonating on me. You mentioned dysfunctional relationships. You wind up picking the same type of situation that you came out of, even though you have gotten your own, you have put yourself in a position to heal, but yet and still, you still brought that same environmental thing into your household. And not only that, you wind up having children. To me, it would appear as you start going through your own evolvement of healing, how was you able to deal with the relivement of what was going on in your marriage with your children, knowing that this looks like the same type of shit I just went through and my mom went through? You know I was going to ask that question.
Yeah. I did know that. It's what I've realized after reflection and looking back is that I had done some progress before I met my ex-husband, but not enough.
Right.
And so it was so easy to me to fall back into those old patterns of being discounted and discouraged and talked badly about and, and used and all that it just felt familiar. And so I went back to what felt familiar.
You used the word familiar. How difficult is it for people to change that word in their life? Is that really a big of an issue that we who have what may be appear to have normal lives, let's put it like this, is even the normal really the best life to have? And if so, why is the word familiar such a difficult word to change as it relates to changing our life, period?
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple things that come up familiar is in our mind safe. We know it. We know how to respond. We know what to do with it. And so I think about all these people that are in abusive relationships, whether they're men or women, all these people that are in stagnant, non-loving marriages that have just been there for 20, 30 years. And it's familiar. It's what they know. And so to me, something has to happen that kind of jolts you and goes, wait a minute. Just because this is familiar doesn't mean it's right or it's good. And I'm not having any joy. So it's a huge and difficult step to go, just because it's familiar, it doesn't mean it's what's good for me.
Were you seeing some of the same stuff in your marriage being displayed on your own children? Like behaviors and patterns and so forth? Because you marry somebody, but it doesn't mean that he or she carried all of those traits that you grew up with of dysfunction and stuff. So was he perpetrating some of the same symptoms that you went through on your children?
To some degree, yes, especially my son. My daughter was just an overachiever, and he liked anything that made him look good. And so, I think there was no physical abuse by either of us, but there was definitely some emotional abuse. And just some of those same negative messages. You're stupid, you're lazy, you're, all those same messages I had heard in my childhood. Now my children were starting to hear, and I was realizing I was trying to counter that. And give them the positive messages. So I've talked to my kids about that, and it definitely had negative impact on them.
Did your kids even say, Mom, why are we here? Why don't you get us out of this? Did you hear your children hollering for help like you was hollering for help when you was in the corner in the safe zone? Because you're dealing with different eras of time too. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, my son would do it by behaviors. He was very oppositional and defiant. And so, it wasn't until we actually left that he said to me, "Thanks, Mom. This is exactly what I needed." So it wasn't until we actually got out that he verbalized that this was difficult for me, and thank you.
Wow. I'm glad. Such a beautiful story of healing. How has your life changed now? Like, what's your message now? What's your journey? I do like those 3 powerful words that you put. I'm going to repeat them again. Forgiveness, hope, and authenticity. How have those 3 words changed for you? The meaning? Because at first, you couldn't have you didn't have hope. You didn't have none of that stuff because it wasn't given to you. But now you shape those words, how have they really impact you, and how are you taking those words and passing it on to other people to give them the same chances that you got?
Yeah, so authenticity to me, that is how I'm living now. I'm living in alignment to my values. I'm myself. I say what I want to say, whether somebody necessarily likes it. I'm not mean, I'm kind, but I say the truth now, my truth. And to me, that's given me incredible amount of freedom. And so now I try to focus on helping others find their truth and then be able to speak their truth and realign their life. Forgiveness to me was another big key. You know, I had to forgive my father, my grandmother, and my mother for sure, and even my other grandparents who didn't come to the rescue. And so I initially pushed back on forgiving because I'm like, they don't deserve to be forgiven. They never said I'm sorry. I confronted them and they denied it.
Right.
But then I realized over time forgiveness was about taking that load off my shoulder. It wasn't about saying what they did was okay. So that was huge. And then now, you know, I fixed my picker. I found an amazing man who we've got a great life together. And for me, that's just so joy-filled, just so joy-filled.
Some people say hope is delayed emptiness. You have clearly showed that hope is resilience in action.
Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe I said that. That just came off the spin of my head.
That was profound.
So, wow. I don't know where that came from. So
I don't know,
you're doing
something. Steal that. I like that.
Yeah, you can use it. Feel free. Because I may not remember it again. But you're doing something truly remarkable right now. You're in the process of collaborating to do books and so forth. Tell the viewers a little bit about the collaboration and why the need to take this story and collaborate it with other authors and put the message out. What's the purpose behind all this?
You know, so it's interesting. The latest collaboration I was in was Cracking the Rich Code, Volume 18, and my chapter was on resilience. And so I just really felt that message needed to get out there because to me, Cracking the Rich Code felt it was about finances. And to me, Cracking the Rich Code is about living a rich life, a true, authentic, rich life.
Yeah.
I'm also in the process of writing my book, which is just kind of my stories and then how I healed through that and then how I became my authentic self. And then I'm actually doing a book for Art of Connection I'm not doing a book, I'm doing a page with a quote, an authentic quote on resilience for this next year coming up as well. And then I have one other one that I'm working on that's Stories of Women. That's a book collaboration. My goal is just to get this message out that there is hope. There is a future. You are worth it. You have so much value. So don't live in that miserable, familiar spot. You know, let me help you, let others help you, push you out of that familiar and really find your authentic self and find that joy.
You know what? You have a beautiful story, and thank you so much for taking time to come and share it. You definitely have that beast mindset. If we can do anything to help get your message out, feel free to contact us. We'll do whatever it takes. How can the viewers reach out to you and follow you on such a beautiful journey?
So on LinkedIn, I'm Meg Johnson Hall. So you can find me there. I have my own website. It's www.firstqualityconsulting.com. And there's also a contact. You can email me at meg@firstqualityconsulting.com. So any of those ways will work.
You guys make sure you reach out. Like I said before on multiple shows, all it takes is one click of a button to change somebody's life and even change your own. With that being said, Meg, thank you so much. This has been another, and I do mean another, exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show.